Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks where kindred souls gather together to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as the February Room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for composite development fly rods and accessories. 40 years of Kiwi ingenuity and graphite technology, now available at cd-fishing.us or your local CD USA dealer. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And remember to go fishing. Here's your host, the Carnops, and this is the February Room.
Well, it's a frigid day here, and I'm hunkered down at the vise, cranking out some bass bugs, which takes me back to the day that I met our guest, Jake Chutz of the Montana Fly Company. Jake, welcome to the February Room.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
You bet, man. We appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know you're busy filling preseason orders up there in Columbia Falls. You've been in the industry a long time, lifelong fly angler. Hoping you can dig a story out of the coffers and share with us today.
I think that's a great way to start. After thinking about a few of the fish that were memorable, that were either landed or lost, I thought it may be as much fun to share a humorous story about a fish that I didn't catch, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We love those.
Right on, right on. So I'm in my third year, something like that, guiding down in southeast Idaho on the Henry's Fork, and we'd stretch up in the Madison, Yellowstone Park, that whole area. And Lynn Sessions was a really well-known regional guide. I learned a lot from him in my early years. In probably, again, my second or third year, he called me and said, "Hey, do you want to go down and guide in Tierra Del Fuego, Argentina?" And I just kind of yelled yes over the phone, and he said, "Cool," and he hung up. And I had to call him back a minute later and say, "Lynn, I don't even know where Tierra del Fuego is on a map." And he told me. I said, "Okay, cool." And I hung up again. Got pretty excited once I started, reading about what was going on down there. So the story is, it was my first time throwing a two-handed rod ever. And although it can be done with a single-handed rod, it's a hell of a lot better down there to be throwing a two-hander. So I bring all the gear down, more rods, reels, fly lines, all sorts of terminal tackle than you could ever use in 10 years in a duffel bag. And I start having at it. We kind of figured out, how to get the line out there and get some good swings and started to catch some nice fish. But there was a specific pool on this property where you couldn't be in the water at all. You're on about a 10-foot high bank. And there would be fish that would that would roll, on the bank side. So you couldn't be in the water. So I decided I'm just going to go ahead and throw this 13-foot 8-weight up over my head with two hands and rocket launch it. Worked for us from this, specific perch throughout that season. And 30, as you and anyone else that knows anything about Tierra del Fuego knows, 20, 30 mile an hour winds is a daily occurrence. And you can still fish in 40, 45, right? But it's hard. So I had about a 35 to 40 mile an hour wind at my back while I'm standing up on this shelf, this bench, and there's not a tree for a mile behind me. And I see a couple fish rolling, and I'm pretty fired up. And I think I had a tungsten-headed size 8, like super prints on. And I started just jacking this two-hander up behind me, thinking I'm going to get it done. And I feel something weird in my back cast, like I can't feel the rod loading at all. So I fire a big back cast up over my head as hard as I can with both hands, and nothing's happening. So I look back, and there's like 70, 80 feet of line literally piled up in a ball 13 feet above my head, right behind the rod tip. And I just kind of ducked my head and threw both hands forward. And that super prince hit me in the side of my head, in the temple, so freaking hard. Not only did I go down, but I was out. It knocked me down and knocked me out, rod out of my hands. I wake up, I don't know, 3 seconds later, 5 seconds later, blood coming down my face, tail tucked between my legs, reeled up all of my stuff. And got back in the Jeep and went back to camp. That was the end of that day.
So the Super Prince knocked you out?
Literally knocked me on the ground, and I saw stars and went out for, I'm guessing, only a few seconds. But I've never got the backcast more than 15 feet behind me, threw it forward, and literally knocked myself down with my fly.
Man, does that wind down there just drive you nuts? I mean, if there's one element that fly fishermen, myself included, hate, it's wind. I'll fish in anything but, a 40 to 50 mile an hour wind just kind of ruins my day. Does that just get to where you're just tired of it?
All right, so let me lay it down like this. So if that wind ruins an hour, which then ruins your day, now throw that into a 8-hour day, 10-hour day, 12-hour day, into a 7-day week, into 90 to 120 days in a row. And yes, you absolutely become, it's almost like a mental switch it's like water torture. Like you hear a drip of water and you just start to internally change, right? The first year down there, I had an old Filson ball cap that had, like the internal ear flaps that would come down, that would fold down. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So I wore that thing every day, and it didn't matter if it was hot, cold, windy or not. You just got used to covering your ears all the time. And then by year 2 and 3, I think we were down there for 5 years. We were bringing headphones, earplugs, foamies, anything you could do to cover your ears. Yeah, it just drove you absolutely nuts, which is also why you had to run dependent rods, because you have an ability to fish 50 to 80 feet pretty easily in a 50 mile an hour wind, given you don't have to make an aerial back. So that was huge.
Well, that's testament to how awesome those fish are, because if anglers are willing to pay that kind of money and endure that kind of travel for those kind of conditions, those fish must be something else.
Well, you and anyone at Steelhead, knows this, but you take the people out of the equation, you take the development out of the equation, you throw yourself into what looks like, just kind of a central Wyoming landscape, that wind rolling 24/7, and you're swinging your fly, head down, hand in your pocket, or you have a customer with you, kind of next to you, and you're fishing with and through that, that customer and that rod. And all of a sudden that line gets tight, then it gets a little tighter. You keep your tip down, it gets a little bit tighter, and then you see, 15 to 23 pounds of brown trout, silver, maybe colored, just tighten up and start backflipping, down and run. It's an unbelievable feeling that's hard to match anywhere.
I don't know that I could do it. I really don't. I don't know that. I don't know if I could take the win, man. I'm kind of a softie when it comes to that anymore.
No, I hear you. And it was just waiting for that next hard pull on the end of that leader is what kept us out there in the wind. Now, I mean, if it was blowing, much over 50, we would drink whiskey or mate on the bank and literally just lay, find a little pocket of trees and lay there. I mean, we wouldn't fish at 70 miles an hour wind, which we would see down there, but that was not average. But definitely, 20 to 30 was something we dealt with daily.
And now a brief message from our sponsors. Introducing the Trist All-Fly Kit, Composite Development's latest game-changing innovation. Utilizing the same butt section, the All-Fly morphs from 5-weight to an 8-weight via interchangeable sections. Need a little more length? Pop the extender into place and the 9-foot rod becomes a 10-footer. All housed within an ingenious tri-folding magnet rod tube, the All-Fly is the most versatile fly fishing tool ever devised, negating the need for multiple rods. Switch from delicate presentations with tiny parachutes to hucking gaudy cone heads. This package must be seen to be believed. Go to cd-fishing.us, click the video tab, and see the Trist All-Fly in action. And remember to go fishing.
Last summer, my family and I rented a cabin on this pretty little lake in northwest Montana. Never been there before, and went out on the water poking around. I was seeing some really big bass, but I couldn't get them to eat a fly. My 6-year-old kid was catching them on plastic worms, hucking them by himself up against the docks and stuff, which was pretty awesome to see. But I couldn't crack the code, and I ended up heading into town one day, and I didn't even know that you guys were located in Columbia Falls somehow. And I saw your storefront, went and knocked on the door, and you and another guy came and answered, and lent me some advice and gave me some poppers and sent me on my way. And I got to tell you, that night I caught this awesome bass. He came up and, classic largemouth. He came up, followed the popper, and just crushed it. And it was sweet, man. Your company, Montana Fly Company, specializes in developing patterns to help fly anglers like me catch more fish. Can you give me some background on MFC?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's a really cool history. The company was started by Adam Trina back in 1998 out of a suitcase and like a 4-page pamphlet of some bugs. And he was a fishing guide for a number of years out of the Missoula, Montana area. And I think that speaks to kind of who we still are today. So when you look at our team from Adam all the way through the group of us that helped move the company forward, we all have guided and fly fished and professionally guided for extended numbers of years. So the idea of a fly company that was really founded by a fishing guide, and he has since, continued to move fishing guides into the team, means that not only do we fish and understand what fly fishing is about, what fly tying is about, what fly patterns are about, but we've all spent a lot of time on the water, not just catching fish, but helping people that don't really fish that often catch fish. So I think the spirit of Montana Fly, comes from living on the water, which to me is pretty special.
Yeah, and you guys have developed some really cool stuff. I was just poking through a fly bin the other day at a fly shop up in Kalispell and looking at some of the new patterns, the streamer flies. I bought a bunch of cripples, the stuff that I don't care to tie anymore. So what's the process for developing flies at Montana Fly Company?
There's a couple different processes. Number one, we have a fantastic group of partner designers that we work with. Guys like Juan Ramirez, Kelly Gallup, the list goes on. We have a great group of 30, 35 guys. So I apologize, I don't have time to mention them all. But a great group of designers. And these guys work with us throughout the year, to let us know what they're working on, what they're fishing, what they're guiding with, if they're guides, how professional guides are doing with the patterns. If the fly tire is not specifically a guide, typically they're dispersing those flies amongst regional guides, and then they give those flies to us and say, "This is what we've done with them. This is why we tied it this way. This is kind of a problem we were trying to solve." And then they let us take a look and say, what do you guys want to do with these? Should we roll them into the catalog, for the next year and offer them to fly shops across the world or not? And we put a lot of stock into the stories that our designers give us on these flies, right? Sometimes a fly might look a touch different than what we're used to, but we trust that boots on the ground testing to say, yeah, it does look a little different. Yeah, the materials are a little different, but this fly hunts, and we'll give them a shot, right? And then at the end of the day, the sales of the pattern, kind of judge whether that pattern will live or die in future years. But it's a really cool partnership with these fly tires that we have to share ideas with. The other side of it are all of us in our experience coming together, saying, hey, we may blend up a pattern that's not specific or original to someone's vice. But it's a basic idea or a truly tweaked or changed to make something better idea of a fly that we know will fish. And we'll kind of draw that out, sketch it out, maybe tie some samples, get that to our factory to give us some production run samples, and then we'll fish those flies and distribute those to some of our other team members and say, hey, you guys fish these. And then come back and have those patterns available to fly shops, those same fly shops across the world. So Um, Definitely some internal development with our team here, as well as a lot of external partnerships and development through the design team. So pretty cool system.
And you guys are represented by dealers all across the country, all across the world?
We are. The majority of our business is in the U.S., but we have some fantastic distributors and dealers in basically all continents as well, which is really cool. So our products, you can find our product in, every part of South America, Western Europe, Russia, all over the U.S., Canada, Mexico. It's pretty cool.
Wow, I didn't realize that, man. That's impressive. So you guys are like essentially a global fly company now. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's been great. It's been great.
I imagine it's been a pretty interesting year for you all, given the pandemic.
It has been. It's been a very interesting year, and I can elaborate that on that as much as you'd like, Justin. On a real basic level, I think those of us that find ourselves in the outdoor industry, got really lucky at the end of the day with how the business and economic side of COVID has worked out. Although we feel for obviously every single person and or small business that has struggled through it. It's put a lot of people outside, whether it's on mountain bikes, sitting in hot tubs, fishing, right? Anything that's out of doors, obviously has seen some substantial growth.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's been good for us folks in the outdoor industry. Yet, being an international business, it's also had its challenges for sure.
No doubt. So obviously, supply chain has been a major issue for some more than others. The international outfitting industry was definitely a very, very difficult year for the traveling angler. Just didn't travel. But the local fly shop, regional fly shop, and outdoor store, had those local people spending more time on local and regional rivers. So. And any watershed, lakes and streams alike. So that's been great to see, kind of a comeback of people fishing more in their regional areas.
And they all need bugs. They all need good bugs.
Everybody needs flies, and we like to think that we make as good a fly as anybody.
Absolutely. I found that your flies they're durable. The proportions are right on dry flies, which isn't something that you see in all commercially tied flies. And getting back to that, that kind of stringent fly development system that you guys have in place, where you have guides that develop stuff and test it through yourselves, through other anglers. What are the qualities of a fly that make it not only a good fly on the river, but one that will sell in bins? Because I do know that there's a difference there.
Yeah. I would say there's three parts to that. What goes into the fly, who puts those parts together on the fly, and then to your third point, kind of that bin appeal idea, what's the end look of the fly, regardless of the quality. So we start with the highest of quality in raw material. So the hook, the bead, the feather, and the grade of the feather, and then how we grade the individual feathers on a pelt or on a skin. What kind of hair we would use, how we grade that hair, what kind of, what flies we use certain grades of hair on. Those would be a few examples of how that raw material piece of it works. So we're picking only the best of the best on basically all of it. And then from there, it's design and how those materials are put on, are put together. In the actual construction of how those materials are applied to the hook matters immensely, from how tightly you are wrapping dubbing on a thread for a dry fly, or the sparseness of a dubbing and a dubbing loop on a nymph, down to thread tension. How all of our fly tyers, who are excellent, apply the correct tension of thread to the hook throughout the tying process.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And you guys also do make those raw materials available to those of us that tie some of our own flies as well. I just tied a bunch of steelhead patterns for an upcoming trip, and using your barred marabou, which is really good stuff. It's long, it's wispy, and I find it far superior to a lot of the other marabous on the market. So tell me a little about the materials that you guys sell as well.
Our material division is, I would say that the vast majority of our business is in the fly category. So we're a fly tying, a fly company at heart. And then to your point, the retail materials, we're looking at these things saying, man, we're grading top notch material. Let's throw this in a package. And we love to hear people's stories of using our materials and why they were slightly different than the competitor and how they like them. It's all about the grade of the raw material to start, and then what we do to it. But the barring process that you're talking about is something that came to us internally here. And I would love to share that secret, but I have to kill you after we were done with this podcast recording. So it's a pretty cool way we do it. And although I can't say exactly how we do it, we get very sharp and precise barring with solid, deep colors. And we want to provide that sort of ingenuity and quality to all of our customers with any product, right? So everyone likes foam. We all use foam. What can we do with foam that's a little bit different? So we started using our printing technologies on foam, and all of a sudden you tie, a foam beetle or a chubby or whatever it is, a stonefly, and with our new printed photo foam, it's actually putting a design onto that foam that's really durable. And prior to that, all you could ever do is put dots or stripes on it with a Sharpie, which we've all done in the past. So, those sorts of ideas, doing something a little bit different and making sure the grade, that quality is second to none, is the key to how we're going to continue to expand our material division moving forward. So we're hoping to keep shoving out some good stuff.
Well, I hope you do. And beyond just trout flies too, everyone should be aware that you guys have saltwater patterns, steelhead flies, as I mentioned, some really cool bass stuff. So fly patterns for all environments and all parts of the globe too.
Yeah, no, that's right, and I think that twofold as the business grows. Of course, we're looking for places to expand with kind of our mindset and our mantra of why we do what we do. Right, where else can we do these things? And I think the second side of that, though, is that 30, 40 years ago, people trout fished. If you lived in New York, you trout fished in your brook trout streams in New York. And if you lived in the West, you trout fished your local streams for, browns and rainbows and cutthroat. But the angler now wants to travel. We all want to fish bass. We want to fish bonefish and tarpon and maybe try our hand swinging a fly at a steelhead or a sea trout or an Atlantic salmon or whatever it might be. All of us want to catch a permit, and we know that we're going to spend more time standing than actually catching it. But the idea is that people are getting out there and looking to fish for a wider range of species, which has really been fun for us because it allows us to expand, our offering for all of those things. And to tie that back to an earlier point, none of us can be experts in everything. So working with our design team is awesome there. Hey, teach us something about tarpon fishing, which then means you're teaching us something about tarpon flies and what those flies need to be and why a certain look or body style behaves differently in a certain water or environmental condition, right? That might have a fish react in a more positive way than on a different fly. So when you stretch into, bass and pike and muskie and then all the saltwater game, it takes having some expertise outside of the office, to help you get there.
Yeah, for sure. We just had a gentleman on the podcast, a guy named Paul Dixon, who he's a striper guide and he's also a Keys guide. He splits his season between Lake Montauk and the Keys, and fishes for tarpon and bonefish and permit down there. And he was mentioning that the same flies that he uses for tarpon, he tests his tarpon flies and his permit flies and then takes them up to Montauk and has found that the stripers love the same flies as they do in the Keys, which I found really interesting. And it's also kind of cool that he has, two kind of testing grounds where he can experiment around. And I had not heard that before. But that just speaks to the point, like that's the kind of stuff that only a guide really knows, or somebody that fishes a lot. But when you have those kind of folks developing your fly patterns for you, it's a huge advantage to the rest of us that don't have obviously that kind of time to go through the minute details of what makes a really, really good fly. And your company excels at that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I appreciate you saying we excel at that. But it is acts of that experience with those anglers and guides, that are out there on the water all the time, testing and kind of researching what's next in fly patterns. And it's crazy sometimes, to your point of crossover, testing a fly in the salt for a tarpon and then having it work, or vice versa, on a striper. And it goes back to just general body style, how a fly is put together, what it does when it's in the water, what it does when you slowly move the rod tip, what does it do when you jerk the rod tip, and how is that different from when you strip the line, whether slow or fast, right? And what their sink rate is, what's their buoyancy level like, neutral or do they sink, right? Is there movement in the material? Or is a beautiful looking fly once put in water and moved stiff as a board, right? And so I think when you look at fish, regardless of where they are, they're reacting to some aspect of movement.
Yeah, for sure. On that note, several years ago, my friend and I were down in Belize, and there was tarpon rolling all over in this back bay. And we just couldn't get them to eat. We went through every fly that the guide had, and they wouldn't eat anything. And finally, I threw on some of these big pike patterns that I had with me that I use up here, and lo and behold, the tarpon started eating them. And I think we landed like 6 fish over the next couple of hours. And I think in that instance, it was the movement of the fly. Everything else we were fishing was kind of staticky. Just your basic kind of clousers and stuff, which certainly worked for tarpon and everything a lot of the time. But for whatever reason, they liked the movement of those bugs I had. And it was really cool to have a Montana pike fly work down there in Belize. And, the guide was certainly impressed and took all the flies that I had with me.
Oh, that's a great story, because Justin, how long were the pike flies? Were we talking 4 or 5 inches? Were we talking 6, 7, 8 inches?
They were probably 5, and we trimmed the tails off. They were a toad, man. That's what I like to fish for pike a lot. It's a toad style with a longer tail, and we just trimmed the tails down. But they were much bigger than the traditional tarpon flies that the guide liked down there, for sure.
Yeah, right. So you have movement those fish haven't seen in a fly, at least in that area. A size change from what they typically see and or eat. Really cool, and it's an interesting point you bring up, because I think it speaks to the fact that all anglers can get into a scenario where we only fish certain flies in certain conditions, because that's where our what do you call that? That's where your comfort zone is, right? You feel your confidence is what I was looking for. That you're confident that in these conditions for these fish in this area, I use these flies. And sometimes just like literally blowing those ideas up with something that someone else might say, there's no way that's going to work. Once in a while, it does, and it's eye-opening when something like that happens. That's a cool story.
And Jake, so you guys are based in Columbia Falls. That's your head office, correct?
Yes. The company was started, like I had mentioned earlier, back in '98 in Missoula, and then within the first few years of its existence, moved up to Columbia Falls and has been here ever since.
Do you got another story for me? You got one. You got one where a fly made all the difference for you.
There was a time where a fly truly made the difference. My wife and I were smallmouth bass fishing last year, and we're running black leeches, and we're running little bait fish, we're running jigs, we're catching a couple fish here and there, but we're seeing a lot more fish than we're catching. And I literally had not fished a girdlebug or patstone or rubber legs, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
I've asked before, but I grabbed a few dozen from MFC's office before we took this specific trip. It was a new place for us. I knew there were some big bass in this particular area, and we're seeing them, and we're not catching the big one. And I said, let's throw girdlebugs. And for the next probably 3 hours, we caught the biggest bass of the day. We had a much better catch rate of the fish we saw. We drank an ungodly amount of Evan Williams Black Label whiskey in the boat. And from that day on, we don't talk about going fishing. We talk about going rubber legging. The story I want to leave you with is truly kind of representation of a good old professional guide, as myself, knowing how to operate a boat, whatever, count the days, it doesn't matter. A lot of days in a boat over a lot of years. Rowing down the Clark Fork with my wife. She's my best fishing partner, by the way. And she lands a toad of a rainbow river left, right before the river takes a hard bank, and there's a big cliff wall there. So there's a back eddy. And I pull in this little sandy back eddy to get a few quick photos of her rainbow. And she's like, oh, this is kind of weird water. Let's park somewhere else. I'm like, no, we want to get the fish back in the water. Don't worry. I got it. Remember, I've done a ton of time on the water. I'm a fishing guide. So of course, if you're a fishing guide, you got it. And I had the anchor in my, kind of the crux of my right elbow. I'm in about chest deep water, and the current's wanting to suck the boat out. And behind me is this kind of, 15 to 20 foot deep channel with pretty heavy current that goes down maybe 500 yards before the bailout. And again, it's a cliff wall all along that bank. So I would hold the boat in the crux of my elbow. I would kind of bring it up towards me, let it go, take 2 shots. She'd dip the fish in the water. I would grab the boat that's trying to leave, put it back in my elbow, bring the boat back to my body. She'd lift the fish, get a couple shots. Did that 2 or 3 times. And on maybe the third little round of 2 photos, we were done and watching the fish kind of breathe in the water at Jen's ankles. And we're just really blown away with how great a day it had been, how beautiful it is to be out in the spring. Of course, I'm paying attention to her, the fish, how great of a day we're having, how psyched we are, and completely had forgotten about the fact that every 3 seconds I'm letting go of the boat to take a couple pictures and catch it again. When I realized that I had not touched the boat, and maybe it's been now 6 to, I reach back to my right hand, there's nothing there. I turn around, and there's my skiff. It's about 45 degrees outside, and it is now doing 360 donuts down the center of that channel, and it's already 30 yards below me. I freak out, set the camera on the bank, jump up on, climb up to the top of the cliff wall, and I just start sprinting downriver, chasing this boat. And it's 150 yards below and out in the channel from me. Kind of run down to the bottom of the cliff wall, take my boots off, take my waders off, and literally dive in. The water was so freaking cold. I lost my breath. I'm like doggy paddling out, finally get to the boat. Thank God, we got the boat. I jump into it, and the first thing I do is look around 360 to make sure no one's coming. Well, there is a boat coming, rounding the corner above us, and it's a camera crew of 3 guys with this massive video camera on a tripod. So anyway, dry off, row the boat back to the bank, get my waders and boots, back in the boat, get Jen in the boat, and by that time, the camera boat was able to slide by. I said, how you guys doing? And the one guy responds with, better than you. That was one of the best things we've ever seen while filming. I don't know who they were, Justin, and to this day, that was probably 6 years ago. I wish I knew who those guys were, because I know they have that entire scenario on film somewhere. that speaks to everyone out there that no matter what you've done, how long you've done it, hilarious and stupid things hopefully happen to all.
Well, and you know what they say, there's two kinds of guides, right? Those that have lost their boat and those that will.
That's exactly right. I've always recovered my boat, but that was truly a day where I did lose it.
Well, great, Jake. Hey, I really appreciate your time today, man. And the next time I'm up in your neck and I can't crack the code, I'll swing in and you can point me back in the right direction.
Go to thefebruaryroom.com where you can access a complete library of our podcast and read more about our guests, their fishing stories, and favorite fly patterns. We're always looking for exceptional fly fishing yarns, and if you have one to spin, shoot us an email at info@thefebruaryroom.com. The February Room is always free, but if you feel like throwing a nickel in the pond, we appreciate any additional listener support. For companies and individuals interested in sponsorship opportunities, please contact us for our media kit. Thanks for stopping by the February Room, and we'll see you down here next week.